Was forced to leave my nanny job by an enraged dad boss, hinting a crisis, while mom boss is unreachable. Right now, I'm sitting outside in my car in front of NF's house, my nerves utterly shot. I arrived at work an hour later than usual since mom boss messaged me last night, telling me she'd be home and that I could come in at 8 a.m. instead of my usual 7 a.m. But when I pulled up at 8, her car was gone. I went inside, only to find dad boss simmering with anger, pacing with the toddlers. His face was cold and hard, much more intense than I'd ever seen. I tried to apologize, explaining mom boss had switched my hours, but he just snapped, "Does it look like MB's here?" and stormed off into his office with a glare that stunned me. He works from home, so I waited, feeling out of place. At 8:30, he marched out and told me to leave. His tone was icy, and I was so confused that I didn't move at first. He told me again to leave. Then, "If you don't want to care for my children, I'll do it." His words felt like a slap. I apologized, trying to explain again, but he cut me off and demanded I leave. He sounded so angry, so different. I slowly started packing up, feeling all wrong about leaving the kids. As I moved around with my things, I told him once more I could stay. That set him off completely. He started ranting, saying really bizarre and frightening things. "What, do you think it's not safe to leave my own kids with me? Do you think I'll hit them? Do you think I'll..." And then he stopped himself, but the implication hung in the room like smoke. It was terrifying, off the wall. I felt unsafe, for myself and for the kids, but also confused because I honestly didn't know if I even had the right to stay in the house. Still, I left because I didn't know what else to do. But sitting in my car, everything inside me screamed that something was not right. Dad boss's behavior was so completely out of character. I've been with his family for 9 months. He's always been kind, considerate, and friendly to everyone. Me, his wife, his children. Sure, sometimes he's struggled with regulating his emotions and will need to disappear into his room to reset, but never, ever anything like this. He's never yelled at anyone, never been rude, never made me feel scared. Now, I'm deeply worried he's experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. I called mom boss 8 times. No reply. I tried her office, but again, nothing. I reached out to a few nanny friends. Some said I should just call the police, but technically, all dad boss did was get angry and force me out. There weren't any direct threats of harm, but my gut felt off. I kept debating, do I stay outside to keep an eye out, or drive to mom boss's office and try to find her in person? The thought of leaving the kids behind gnawed at me. Eventually, I drove by mom boss's office and found it's closed. Dead. It's a small private office, just her and 2 staff, and not a single person was there, the lights off, doors locked. Everything about this felt wrong. The building worry pushed me to call a local mental health service and talk through what happened. Meanwhile, one of my nanny friends took her own steps and contacted the police for a welfare check at the house. She said she had to, especially since mom boss claimed to be off work, her office was closed, and no one could reach her. I have to admit, I agree. None of this feels right. Update 1. I am home now, and after a long, emotional day, I finally had a much-needed call with a close nanny friend who reassured me that I did what was best. Sometimes, even if you do what's right, things don't work out in your favor. Physically, everyone is fine. Myself, the kids, dad boss, mom boss. No one was physically harmed. But emotionally? Mentally? I am not okay. This has been the worst day I've had in years. There were so many agonizing moments where I second-guessed myself, where I was absolutely terrified that I had put my charges in danger, or that something terrible had happened to their mother. And in the end, to be told I overreacted and embarrassed the family. I can't describe how angry and deeply disrespected that made me feel. I feel belittled. Let me lay out exactly what happened. Last night, around 7:45 p.m., mom boss texted me to say I could come in at 8 a.m., since she was taking the day off. I replied, confirming I'd be there at 8. Normally I'm scheduled for 7 a.m., so this was a bit unusual, but not alarming. When I got there at 8 a.m., I noticed mom boss's car wasn't in the driveway. I walked inside and found dad boss in the living room with the kids, looking visibly upset. I put my things down, apologized since his mood was so clearly sour, and told him that mom boss had told me to arrive later. He just looked at me coldly and said mom boss wasn't there. Then he disappeared into his office. I started playing with the kids, but at about 8:30 a.m., dad boss suddenly stormed into the playroom and told me to leave. I've never seen him like that before. His face was red with rage, his whole energy hostile. He's never even raised his voice at me before, so it totally caught me off guard. He was furious, accusing me of not wanting to be there or do my job, and basically forcing me to leave. I tried to explain, it was just a misunderstanding, I wanted to stay, but he wouldn't have it. His demeanor was so out of character I genuinely didn't feel safe. And then he started making comments that made me start to worry about the kids' safety. As I hesitated, trying to figure out what to do, he picked up on my fear and started lashing out verbally, saying, "What, do you think I can't be left alone with my own kids? Do you think I'm going to hurt my kids? Do you think I beat my kids? Do you think I'm going to kill my kids?" That last comment chilled me to my core. I was scared, but I felt that my presence was only making things worse, so I left, anxious and second-guessing every move. In my car, my hands were still shaking. I tried desperately to contact Mom Boss, called and texted her personal phone at least half a dozen times, and even tried her work office. I know she said she'd taken the day off, but I had no idea where else to turn. Out of options, I even drove to her office but found it closed. I reached out to several nanny friends for advice, one of whom ultimately called the police for a welfare check after I relayed the situation. She knew the family's address because she'd babysat for them previously. I drove to a park near the house and sat there, watching, on edge, trying to guess what was going on inside, and reaching out to anyone who might know where Mom Boss was, including a colleague. Time crawled by until about 10:30, maybe 10:45, when police officers finally arrived at the house. They knocked, Dad Boss answered, and soon after, he called me. He asked if I'd call the police, and I told him no. A friend of mine had called because she was so worried after I reached out to her. He asked me to come back and watch the kids so that he could go look for Mom Boss. I could tell, from the way his tone had shifted, more neutral, far less agitated, that the officers were probably with him. When I got back to the house, I found Dad Boss there with 2 officers and the kids. The conversation was calm now. Dad Boss told the police that he and Mom Boss got into an argument, no physical altercation, and that she'd left the house around 6:45 a.m., leaving her phone behind. The officers asked me a few questions. I answered honestly. Then Dad Boss left with one of the officers, ostensibly to find Mom Boss, while the other officer remained outside as I watched the children. Thankfully, they were so young they didn't seem to sense anything unusual at all. At 2 p.m., both Mom Boss and Dad Boss returned, separately, and spoke with the officer outside. Then Mom Boss came in and asked to speak with me alone. Dad Boss wouldn't look at me. Outside, Mom Boss was furious, telling me that I had taken a private family matter and made it public, humiliating her and her family. She was upset that I had contacted her colleague, that I'd told friends about what was going on, and that the neighbors would have seen police outside. She accused me of crossing boundaries and exposing their family. Her anger radiated, telling me she'd have to spend the entire weekend doing damage control, that she wouldn't be needing me next week, probably not at all moving forward. So yes, I left, tears rolling down my face, pretty certain I'd just been fired. I doubted everything I'd done in the moment. But after talking it through with my friend, I found clarity. I stand by my actions. I did what I had to do to protect the children I was responsible for. I am not responsible for the family's social standing. My responsibility is the safety of the children in my care, plain and simple. I showed up at the time I was told to arrive, and instead of being met with professionalism or basic respect, I was treated with open hostility. Dad Boss's behavior, while not overtly threatening, was so strange and unsettling that I genuinely thought something terrible was happening. The comments he made, about hurting or killing his own kids, were shocking and completely out of line. I thought he was having some kind of psychotic break. That deep gut feeling told me something was terribly wrong, and that's why I couldn't just go home and pretend everything was fine. Thank God, in the end, the kids and Mom Boss were okay. But I will never feel that my concern was misplaced. Mom Boss had left the house, unreachable, knowing I would be there at 8 a.m., leaving me to face her extremely angry husband. For hours, I couldn't contact either of them. There were moments where I truly thought she might be dead. There has never been a time where I couldn't reach a parent unless I knew for certain they were on a plane. The anger and disrespect I received as a consequence for genuinely caring about their children's well-being has left me questioning whether I should continue in this field at all. I understand why they feel embarrassed right now. I would too, if our roles were reversed. But their embarrassment stems from their behavior, not mine. I wanted to share this story not only as a catharsis, but as a warning to other nannies, and as a wake-up call to parents. For 9 months, I worked with this family and never saw the sides of Mom Boss and Dad Boss that I saw today. You don't know your employers as well as you think you do. Some people are extremely good at hiding dysfunction, and the reality is, you can never truly know the state of someone's marriage. What looks like chaos to you might feel normal to them. You can't control the actions of others, no matter how professional or careful you are. I've been a career nanny for 20 years, so I've seen a lot, good, bad, and truly wild. I know every family is different, and every home has its own energy, its own way of existing. But wherever I work, I make an active choice about the kind of environment I accept. I will never, under any circumstances, allow myself to be subjected to verbal abuse from an employer. Maybe that's just how some families speak to one another, but that doesn't make it right, and it certainly doesn't make it okay for me or for the kids. Of course, I love and adore my charges. I think any good nanny does. I always want what's best for them, and I take on my role as their caretaker, advocate, and protector seriously. But I never forget that I'm not their parent. There's only so much I can do. Still, people sometimes forget that when you hire a nanny, you're inviting someone deep into your life, your home, your everyday. It's incredibly intimate. Not everyone's ready for that level of openness, and I get it. But you've hired me to care for your kids. If, for any reason, I start to believe they're in danger, even if the threat is their own parent, I will act. That's my absolute responsibility. And here's what I wish every parent knew. Ask yourself, Is your household really safe? Is this an environment where kids and caregivers are protected? In all my years, I've never had to contact CPS or the police because I feared for a child's safety, and I don't take that lightly. I pride myself on being rational and even-keeled. I don't overreact. I know no home is perfect. I've witnessed more family drama than most people ever will. But what happened today, the things I saw and heard, crossed every line. No nanny should ever be subjected to that. More importantly, no child should ever be exposed to it. Update 2. At 9:12 p.m., my doorbell rang, and there was Mom Boss on my stoop, no coat, hair wet like she'd showered just to have something to do with her hands. She asked if she could come in. I said yes because I couldn't make my mouth form any other word. She started apologizing before she even cleared my doorway, rushed, uneven, like she was trying to outrun herself. I owe you an apology, over and over, her voice cracking on the word oh. I made tea we didn't drink. She told me she hadn't sent the text last night. She swore it, then froze and waited like she'd tossed a grenade on my coffee table. I pulled out my phone and handed her the screenshot. Her face changed in this tiny, precise way, her mouth went flat. I never put periods in texts, she said. It sounded insane to care about punctuation, but I got it immediately. Her texts are full of exclamation points and purple hearts. Last night's message was cold, clean, a period placed like a stamp. She said she'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while giving baths and then forgot it there. She said they had argued late, that he'd accused her of planning to leave him and recruiting the nanny to make him look unfit, that he kept asking who I was really loyal to. He hadn't slept 2 nights in a row. He was convinced of things that didn't exist. She told me after the officers left, she'd gone to a friend's and sat in their guest room until she could breathe. She admitted she'd been cruel to me on purpose earlier because she needed a soft target for the humiliation rattling her ribcage. Then she said the part I didn't expect. When Dad Boss came home from looking for her, he'd put holes in the garage drywall with his fist and the neighbor called the police on the noise. A second set of officers came. He was lucid enough to answer questions, and then he wasn't. He started crying and laughing at the same time. They took him to the hospital. He's on a 72-hour hold now. She asked if I would make a statement for CPS because a social worker had been assigned already. Not because anyone was hurt, but because cops plus kids triggers the machine. She said the social worker would likely call me anyway, and she wanted to look me in the eye and ask, not command. She asked, too, if I could come by in the morning for a few hours so she could go to the hospital to sign papers and talk to his psychiatrist. The kids would be there, her sister would be there. I said yes to the statement and yes to a short shift if her sister was present. My stomach did a horrible flip when I said it, which I think was equal parts love and dread. This morning, their house was scrubbed within an inch of itself. Candles going, dishwasher humming, classical music low like a hotel lobby. Her sister answered the door with a baby on her hip who wasn't hers. The toddlers barreled into me so hard I had to take 2 steps back. Their cling didn't feel scared. It felt like when your day finally has a familiar shape again. I went straight to the floor with them and let them climb me like a tree while I took inventory with my eyes. No broken picture frames. No overturned chairs. There was a patch of fresh spackle on the door jamb, smooth and bright against the paint. A suitcase sat half-packed by the mudroom, men's button-downs folded with military precision on top. Mom Boss came out of the office holding a folder. Safety plan, she said, wry like a person learning a new language by immersion. She told me, calmly, that regardless of the next week's outcome, she won't allow him to be alone with the kids until he's cleared by his team, and even then, there will be rules. She told me she's sleeping at her sister's for now with the children. She told me there will be no more gray areas, either I work in a house that has a plan and follows it or I don't, and she respects that either way. Then she cried like someone who hasn't cried in 10 years and is making up for lost time. While the kids napped, a detective called me from the living room couch. It wasn't an interrogation. It was measured, patient, the kind of voice you get good at keeping when people are cracking. I repeated what happened, careful with my own words, and he thanked me for being the adult in the room when you were the only one who didn't live there. I didn't know what to do with that sentence, so I wrote it in my notes app because I didn't want to forget he said it. At 11:08, my phone buzzed with an email from Dad Boss's account. I opened it because how could I not? It was short. He said he was clearer now, that he was ashamed, that he doesn't remember all of it but remembers seeing my face and hating that I was scared of him. He said the sentence he threw at me about killing his kids was a thing I heard my mouth say and I cannot put it back in, and that he is going to do whatever his psychiatrist tells him to do. He said he had used his wife's phone to change my start time because he wanted to control who walked into his morning, and that he sees now how deranged that was. There was a PDF attached, an apology letter addressed to me by name, and a written statement that I had not done anything wrong for my records. He said 2 weeks severance had been sent to my account and that he'd informed their payroll company to terminate my access with no negative notation. He wrote, I don't want the last memory my children have of you to be the day I scared you out of our house. The kids woke up after that and life was bizarrely normal for 20 whole minutes, diapers and applesauce and wheels on the bus on loop. The older one pointed at my wrist and said, watch. He doesn't normally label accessories. He repeated it 3 times, bright and emphatic, and then, so matter of fact it made my bones go hollow, Daddy broke Mommy's watch. He went back to poking a blueberry like he was conducting a science experiment. I looked down at my own watch and had to sit with my hands flat on the table until my face cooled. When Mom Boss came back, I told her, and she didn't flinch. She nodded, took a breath, and said, "It's in the trash. I'll show the social worker." Quiet, steady. Like she was rehearsing for a role no one should ever have to audition for. Before I left, we stood in the entryway and made eye contact the way you do when you're picking teams on a sandlot and it suddenly occurs to you what team you're actually on. She asked me if I wanted to come back next week in a limited capacity while they got resources lined up, just mornings, with her sister or her there at all times. She said if I said no, she would hand me an envelope with severance and a printed reference letter and hug me and never guilt me about it. She said I had been her witness today and she'll be mine, if I ever need it. I told her I need to sleep on it. That I need to get my nervous system to stop sounding like a fire alarm before I make promises to anyone. She nodded and pressed the envelope into my hand anyway. "In case your answer is no," she said. "You still did 9 months of good here." When I walked out, the neighbor across the street was sweeping his walkway, slow and pointed like people do when they're not actually sweeping. He raised his chin at me, a quiet little salute I pretended not to see. In my car, I opened the envelope and found not just a check and a letter, but a Polaroid from a month ago, me in the backyard, one kid plastered to my hip, the other mid-giggle with a bubble wand. On the back, in her handwriting, no periods anywhere, she'd written, "Thank you for showing up for them and for me even when I didn't deserve it." Update 3. When I walked in at 8:57, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and toast. The sister had the baby from yesterday in a wrap, his hair sticking up like dandelion fluff. The toddlers were in the playroom clicking magnet tiles together in a concentration that felt like a whisper. There were new outlet covers on outlets that had already had outlet covers. Overkill as a prayer. CPS arrived at 10:12, 2 people, soft shoes, one of them wearing a necklace made out of what looked like their own kids' pony beads. They knelt on the rug, not above anyone. The older toddler offered the bead person a fake cookie, which was accepted with ceremony. It felt like 2 parallel universes trying to shake hands, crisis and tea party. I answered questions, the kind you expect and a few that thudded. Had I ever seen him talk to himself? Had he ever asked me to lie for him? Had I noticed new cameras in the house? I surprised myself by knowing exactly where the new cameras were because he'd put them in crooked and I notice when frames tilt. They didn't interview the kids alone, not today. The social worker asked, "What sound does a bus make?" And we all got to chant round and round for a merciful 30 seconds. Then the older one touched the bead necklace and announced, like he was telling someone the weather, "Daddy talked at the lights." The room tilted a degree. The social worker didn't flinch, just said, like a librarian. Later, quietly in the kitchen, the sibling showed them the baggie with the broken watch face inside. It looked like an insect wing. At 11:03, her phone lit up with a hospital number. She moved to the dining room but the house is bones and air, we all heard the shape of it anyway. Extended. Medication. "Sleeping now, finally." She said, "Thank you" 3 times like she was bowing. When she came back, she pressed her fingers to her eyelids and said they're keeping him longer than the initial window, that the working word the psychiatrist used was mania. She said it the way people try on a coat that might be theirs, careful, unbelieving, already thinking about the receipt. The minute the CPS car pulled away, the internet in the house went feral. The echo woke itself up. The living room iPad began to ring with his name over and over in gray bubbles. The older toddler shouted, "Daddy!" and made a beeline, and I had to become a goalie just that fast. The sister scooped him like she was catching a spill. The call connected itself for a heartbeat, the tiniest sliver of his voice, wild, bright and cutting through the room. "Put them on, and then the line broke because she hit end with the trained reflexes of someone who's worked a helpline. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor and match my breathing to the rhythm of the dishwasher. She was already dialing the hospital back. She put it on speaker because we were all already in it. "He can't call the house," she said, and the nurse said he used the unit phone, that they'd noted, that this is not unusual. The nurse's voice was a wool blanket. When the line clicked off, the sister said, "We need the paper," and her voice had iron in it I hadn't heard. "Yesterday. We were in the magistrate's office by 1:40 with car seats that make you sweat just looking at them. The waiting room had chairs that have never known softness. She had a folder that could cut fruit, police incident number, the detective's card, the picture of the watch. I sat between a woman holding a sleeping toddler in a leopard print coat and a man with paint under his fingernails. There is a quiet to courthouse hallways that I don't know how to write down. Everyone in it is carrying something loud. When she went back, I stayed with the kids and pretended to read a book about a duck going to the moon. The older one traced the court seal on the paper bookmark like it was a sticker he was deciding whether to earn. She came back 40 minutes later with a stack of copies and a face that had learned how to be 2 things at once. She handed me one of the papers because it had my name typed where it needed to be typed. It said I was allowed to be on the list of approved caregivers. It said no unsupervised contact until his psychiatrist signed. It said other things that made my chest feel both bolted and unlatched. On the way home, her phone buzzed with a delivery notification. Groceries, she said, confused, and then, as if the world wanted to be on the nose, a driver was already on her porch with 6 gallons of milk and a flotilla of yogurts. The receipt was from his account. There was a note to the driver in the app that made my throat go hot. Please leave by side door so the cameras don't wake the baby. He was triangulating life from a room with shatterproof windows. She stood there in the doorway for exactly 3 seconds and then texted the nurse, "He is placing orders for pickups to our house." The nurse replied with a sentence that was both a balm and a blow. "We've taken his phone." We spent the last half hour of my shift on the floor blowing bubbles, which felt like a joke and also a miracle. The younger one giggled in hiccups until he fell over. There was a new post-it on the fridge in her handwriting. Purple hearts, no periods, listing rules like someone knitting a lifeline. Doors open, helpers answer the door, no negotiations with exhaustion. I watched her cross-call locks guy off and then underline call therapist 3 times. At 4:06, my own phone buzzed. An email from him again, subject line just my name. I did not want to open it and I opened it anyway. It was shorter than a breath. He wrote that he'd signed the papers the hospital gave him, that he understands he cannot come home right now, that he is not okay and is finally willing to say that out loud to strangers and to the person who cleans applesauce off his daughter's cheeks. In the second paragraph, the gears of his brain stuttered on the page. He said, "Could you bring them to the garden at visiting hours so I can see the way they run?" The sentence looked like a photograph developing and then washing out. There was a second email right behind it from the unit social worker telling all of us, me included because she had my address from the CPS form, not to respond to any requests about the children and to direct all contact through her. Her name was signed in that hand that parents of everyone learned to recognize, crisp, a little tired, resolute. I told her, the mom, when she came back into the kitchen. She didn't wobble. "We keep the plan," she said, with the certainty of a person who has decided to memorize a poem and say it until it's bone. She took my hand across the counter and it felt like a truce you make with a storm. I went home with the envelope I hadn't cashed yet still in my bag and a copy of the order tucked behind my insurance card. In my parking lot, as if the day wanted one more small strangeness, a woman I recognized vaguely from their street walked by with a dog I've never seen her with. She paused when she saw me, then said, "Honey, you looked like a ghost the other day. You don't today." I didn't have anything bright to give back, so I held up my hand with the dimples the toddlers had bitten into it when they were babies and she nodded like that counted. I slept for 2 hours and woke up to a voicemail from his mother that started with my full name and ended with "We are a good family," every word between those poles a tightrope. I texted her back one sentence that didn't leave much for her to step on. All communication goes through, social worker's first name. I blocked the number and lay there listening to the upstairs neighbors laugh at a sitcom like it was a language I used to speak. I don't know yet if I'm going back next week. Today, I said yes to tomorrow morning, because she has to sit in a glass-walled room and say yes to signatures that will redraw her life and somebody has to hand the kids blueberries and answer every fifth why. When I left their house, the older one pressed a magnet tile into my palm like a ticket. It was the purple one. On the back of it, in the tiniest Sharpie, she'd written my name. I didn't notice until I was at a stoplight and the sun lit it up. It looked like a piece of stained glass. It felt like 1, 2. Update 4. At 7:58, the house smelled like orange peels and the kind of coffee you make when you've slept in 32-minute increments. There was blue painter's tape etched over one of the interior cameras like someone had bandaged an eye. The locksmith's card was magneted to the fridge next to a crooked construction paper sun. The sister wore the same wrap, new baby snoring with his mouth open like a coin slot. The toddlers did that skittery little kid jogged toward me and then stopped short so I could kneel and they could launch. That exact choreography is how my lungs remember normal. I clocked small changes because that's how I am. The Echo unplugged and coiled like a sleeping snake, a sticky note on the back door at adult eye level that said deliveries to front only in purple hearts, a new deadbolt with edges that still had their showroom shine. The older one tugged my sleeve and showed me a line of magnet tiles he'd arranged like dominoes, a single gap in the middle. He tapped the gap with the seriousness of a road engineer. "Hole," he said, and then, almost cheerfully, "Garage." I swallowed and smiled and asked if we could make a window instead, and he nodded like I'd suggested dessert for breakfast. At 9:21, a guy in a polo showed up with a clipboard and a backpack the shape of a turtle shell. "Smart Nest," it said on his shirt. He had booties already in his fist, mid-bend to put them on when he looked up and saw all of us at the door like a freeze. "Here to install the backyard cam," he said, like this was someone's Thursday plan. He read off the work order without being asked. The name on it was Dad's. The note said side yard, don't ring, family has baby. The sister folded the paper copy of the order in her hand like origami and told him, very evenly, that no one was installing anything today, that there was a court order, that he could call his dispatch if he wanted a voice other than ours to explain it. He was nice, a little pink around the ears, the way decent people get when they've accidentally stepped into something private. He called his dispatcher on speaker. Whoever was on the other end said they'd flagged 3 other outstanding tickets for the address, doorbell replacement, garage motion sensor, living room sound field. We all made the same face at the same time, that surprised hurt expression like when you lift a rug and see the outline where furniture used to be. The sister asked him to email cancellation confirmations, which he did, fingers clacking, and then he went away backwards, apologizing to the air. At 10:07, the unit social worker called while we were peeling bananas. Her voice is the kind that makes you put your elbows on the counter without meaning to. There'd be a status hearing at 2:30 by video from the hospital, she said. The doctor was petitioning to extend, and they wanted Mom on. The words unspooled like a legal charm, less courtroom than telemedicine, but a judge in a black square would be there, and there would be boxes with our faces inside them. We'll get childcare, the mom said, flicking on the kettle even though no one had asked the water's opinion. She looked at me the way you look at a person you've already decided to trust with something breakable. Can you stay? I said yes and felt it in my ribs first. Between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, the kind of quiet we've all forgotten how to name visited. The younger one sat on my lap for 8 entire minutes, just sat, tracing the veins on the back of my hand like he was learning a map. The dishwasher hummed a domestic ohm like nothing bad has ever happened anywhere. Then the doorbell rang with that new deadbolts hop that doors do when the wood still remembers a different hardware. A florist on the stoop with a forest in brown paper. His face was open, proud to be delivering something pretty. The card was in Dad's handwriting, unmistakable once you've filed enough permission slips. Grow the garden for when I come home. Please bring them at visiting. The sister took a breath like she was about to go underwater and said, kindly, that they couldn't accept it, that he wasn't allowed to send things, that she was so sorry because the peonies really were gorgeous. She called the unit as soon as the door shut. The nurse said she'd talk to the floor clerk about flagging his account. Not unusual, she said again, a refrain that is both comfort and cut. Nap was that miracle where two kids go under at exactly the same minute because the planet tilts in your favor. I put my phone face down and then flipped it again like a superstitious sailor. At 12:02, an email came through from someone whose signature had a tiny cross after their name, hospital chaplain. It was short. He'd asked them to add me to his forgiveness list, whatever that was at that hospital, and would I be open to receiving a letter via the unit. I stared at the word forgiveness until the letters looked like shapes. I wrote back one sentence that felt like walking barefoot across a creek on rocks. All correspondence needs to go through the social worker. Thanks. I CC'd her because we're all doing paperwork now even on our breath. At 12:39, the carbon monoxide alarm chirped once like a hiccup. Everyone froze, even asleep people somehow. It didn't chirp again. The sister and I looked at each other with the wide eyes of people who have recently been told that the lights talk. She went straight to the stove and checked each knob, fingertip light. One of them had the barest wobble you only notice if you live here. She shut the gas at the wall with a movement that didn't look like the first time. The mom called the gas company like a person ordering a pizza, precise and polite and with a code that gets you past whatever gate. 15 to 45, the dispatcher said, which is a sentence that means nothing and everything. The guy in the beige coveralls arrived in 12, ran a wand around the baseboards, waved it like a fairy godmother near the oven, and frowned the smallest frown. Nothing dangerous, he said, but you've got a leaker here, and tapped a fitting with his knuckle. He tightened something with a name that sounded like a cartoon character. He installed a shiny little cap that caught the light and my reflection in a dot. He commended the alarm, commended the call, commended the moms, commended the world for catching this one tiny invisible thing. I felt a strange spasm in my chest, this collision of relief and that other knowledge we're all carrying, which is, that sometimes the person who says something wild is also telling you something true. At 2:22, we arranged ourselves like actors backstage. The sister took the kids to the playroom with a Tupperware of blueberries and a stack of board books that could stop a door. Mom set the laptop on the dining table, the good one with the leaf pulled out, and the judge's box sprang to life. There is a specific hush to remote court that I am convinced got invented 5 minutes ago, everyone in their private rooms pretending they are all sharing a ceiling. Dad's little square flickered on. He was in paper scrubs under a cardigan that had to be his mother's because it sat on his shoulders like a borrowed idea. He smiled when he saw us all in our rectangles, that bright wide pain of a smile that isn't about any of the people in the room. The doctor's box was steady, the social worker's as resolute as her emails. When the judge asked if anyone objected to proceeding, he said, quickly, "Can I talk too?" and said my name. It hit me like a saucer he'd flung across a table. The judge's voice slipped one octave lower. "Sir, you will address the court, not individuals." He nodded too many times. He proceeded to tell the judge about light bulbs and gas, about geofences and magnets, about how the nanny is on our team, and then he started to cry with that open-mouthed astonishment of someone hearing his own voice from inside a cave. The judge extended the order like peeling tape, slow and sure. 60 days, supervised only, no video contact with the children, one adult contact list to be managed by the unit social worker. The mom's hand was flat on the table the whole time like she was keeping it from floating away. When it was over, he looked at the camera and said, softly, "I don't want to be the kind of father that got that piece of paper," and for a second the screen looked like a mirror no one asked for. At 3:03, the internet hiccuped again like it was sick of being part of our narrative. The living room iPad lit up with a gray bubble from an unknown Apple ID asking to join the family plan. The sister moved like a goalie and tapped decline so fast her finger squeaked. The mom texted the detective from yesterday without preamble, "He's trying devices." Within 5 minutes, the detective wrote back that they'd add it to the report, that it matters, that they're seeing it more and more. Wired houses used as levers. I wrote that sentence in my notes app because it felt like a tiny thesis on modern life. At 3:27, his mother showed up with a foil-tented casserole like a trope in the walk of someone who has never once not been let into a door she knocked on. She didn't read the post-it. She looked straight past me when I opened the door and said my first and last name like a roll call. Then, "We are a good family," as if rehearsing for a chorus. I held the hinge side of the door because I needed to put my hand on something I knew would hold. The sister appeared behind me with a calm I wanted to borrow and explained the order like you'd explain gravity, not a suggestion, not a moral stance, just the way things fall. The mom came up last and used the mom voice you use when you're teaching toddlers about stoves, kind and no, not today. Not until the doctor clears. You can call social worker's first name. The casserole woman's face did 3 emotions in 2 seconds: offense, panic, calculation, and then she backed off the porch like she'd missed a step she thought would be there. She said, "This is not who he is," to the juniper bush. The kids yelled grandma from the playroom because everyone knows the cadence of that word, and I felt something like a wrench in my gut. The door shut. The sister slid the chain with a click that was obscene in daylight. We ate peanut butter toast cut into squares because triangles felt too sharp. The older one had blueberry lips and pointed to the purple magnet tile in my pocket because he sees everything I think I'm hiding. "Ticket," he said, satisfied with the identification. He pressed his palm to my cheek like he was checking if I had a fever. "Cold," he declared, then thudded his forehead into mine with cheerleader force. My eyes watered in the way eyes water when your nervous system takes its coat off for a second. At 4:04, HR from his company called the house line, which never rings, voice high-pitched from skating all morning across other people's snow. They asked if he was available for a standing 4 p.m. The mom inhaled and said, in the most professional tone I've ever heard pass through a human mouth in sweatpants, that he was on medical leave and all communication should go through her email on record. There was a microscopic pause on the other end where you could feel a person update their spreadsheet. "We're sorry," HR said, like a fax. The mom hung up and laughed for 1 precise second, this weird bright staccato, and then clapped her hand over her mouth because laughter felt like something to ration. My shift was supposed to end at 5. At 4:41, the doorframe man from the morning came back with a gas company sticker he'd forgotten to leave, because the universe is a slapstick sometimes. He stuck it near the stove knob like a tiny yellow stubbornness. The kids woke up at the smell of lemon cleaner because everything smells like lemon cleaner now. We played a game that was mostly just throwing a soft ball up and making a sound every time it came down. The younger one opted for boop like a cartoon bubble. The older one picked hey, casual, like a teenager answering a text. The last throw clocked the sister in the temple and she said, "I'm fine," and then sat down on the floor, and cried with her mouth open and no sound. The mom slid down next to her. There is a way women sit on floors together that architects should study. When I left, there was a sticky note on the inside of the front door in her handwriting that said, with purple hearts, "No decisions after 8 p.m. I put my hand flat under it like I was spotting a child on a beam. In my pocket, the purple tile made a small warm square against my thigh. My phone buzzed as I hit the bottom step. An email from the unit social worker to a CC list that had grown to look like a bizarre little family tree. She wrote that the hearing had gone through, that the extended plan was in effect, that she'd updated the visitor log and the phone access notes, that any requests about the children would be documented as boundary violations now. The last line was a sentence I will print out and stick to something. You are doing the next right thing, and the next right thing often looks like very small life. In my car, I finally opened the chaplain's follow-up, because curiosity is a mouth that doesn't close. It was a paragraph from him. No scripture, just a description of a man sleeping for the first time in days, the way the whole unit's noise dims when one person finally lets the tide take them. I put my forehead on the steering wheel and thought about sound, how the house today had been full of soft ones, beads clicking, dishwasher breathing, post-its whispering instructions, and how sometimes quiet is the loudest story you can tell. I don't know about next week yet. I know about tomorrow morning. I know that I will walk in and hang my bag on the same hook I always do and peel 2 bananas and say hey like we're bouncing a ball. I know that the rule now is open doors, and the poem now is safety plan, and the team is the people who can hear the alarm when it chirps once. When I pulled out of their street, the neighbor with the broom was back, this time actually sweeping, lines of leaves forming little punctuation marks along the curb. He didn't salute. He didn't have to. The air felt a notch less taut. I put the purple tile on my dashboard where the sun can get it. It glowed like a piece of stained glass on a Tuesday. It looked like a thing that could catch light and throw it somewhere useful.